we've spoken to other people, and a lot of them usually gravitate towards Asians
Mm,
when they come to a new country, or if they just go to a gathering, they do that.
mm,
I found myself, especially early on, would gravitate away from Asians.
yeah,
We sort of spoke about it the other night. Can you talk about any of that and
yeah.
potentially how that come? I guess we're going back to the South African
Mm,
roots and ties.
yeah. I think if I look at like sort of the order over my life, probably when I was younger, I would say I gravitated away from Asians, and I'll sort of come into why that's happened. Then I think for a while, maybe I gravitated more too, but I think there's different thought processes. So when we were in primary school, like I said, we were local Chinese South Africans, but there were a couple of foreign, like yeah, Chinese that were ethnically Chinese that weren't necessarily from. They were their family
Fresh off
came
the
from
boat
Peking. Yeah, it could be
in the
Hong
nicest
Kong,
way.
Taiwan, or China, but they didn't really speak English properly.
Yeah.
Actually, I think they couldn't. A lot of them because they came quite young. Like they literally had arrived and then couldn't speak English, so they had to go to English remedial classes.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was always like kind of distancing myself subconsciously from them, so that my wider friend group would be like, ah, he's not part of them. But also, we literally couldn't speak to each other until like they were 3 or 4 years down the line when they'd gone to English school. So I think because of that experience, I probably gravitated away from Asians naturally.
Yeah.
Then probably in like university and the like, there was a bit. Maybe I was a bit interested in Asian culture coming to Brisbane. So I wouldn't say I like gravitated towards Asians, but I was always interested to understand different life experiences and how
Open to how they're living and their
yeah,
experiences. Yeah, that's yeah, I guess I'm quite similar as well in that sense in terms of like when I was younger, you, well, growing up, like we were the token Asians. But then as I think I mentioned this like on my podcast, like when I went to a school that was like predominantly Asian, like that's when I was like, ugh, like I was trying to. I don't want to be with them because you're right. Like when you go to school and you're the local Asian, and then you've got
mm,
your like Asians who've just come to Australia, you don't want to be associated with them because you kind of just think like, well, I'm not like them. I'm like you guys,
Can speak English. I've been
and
here
I
my whole
can
life.
speak English,
yep,
and you don't want to be associated as like, oh, they can't speak English, or and I don't know why. Like I say that was them, but I still do that now, and I don't not because I'm being rude, but it's just and not because I think that I'm better than them,
mm,
but it's just my mindset,
yeah.
right? That I'm just like, oh no, I'm like I don't know, it's weird.
I think yeah. When you're talking about that, I was actually thinking actually in primary school, I think there was a point where almost like it was a bit of pride in that you're like I'm local, like you said, I'm local, and so I'm not necessarily exactly the same as the rest of my classes, but like you a little bit unique. Like you've
Yeah,
got that like a little bit of
the
both.
edge. You got
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like you're local, but you're still Asian, so you could be friends with them if you wanted to, but you kind of choose like it doesn't really quite work. But I think now, as I've gotten older, I still probably gravitate more to. I'd even say more Australians because I live in London. That, but if I do see, someone like an Asian or just anyone who really like is struggling to fit in, I do make a conscious effort to try and get them involved.
I think
So that's where I was saying that there's a little bit of a change now.
Yeah.
this might be slightly controversial, but you look at the Chinese South African community, there was always a very big we were here first,
Mm,
and these are the overseas
mm,
Chinese or from Hong Kong. And I think now talking through this, and I really like the way you articulated that, thinking of at school
mm,
we're here and I don't really need them. I'm kind of my own
mm,
Chinese.
mm.
I think that in the back of our minds definitely played some role. The fact that we're the the South African Chinese and they're the Hong Kong Chinese or
Whatever they
whatever it
may
may be.
be. But I also think in South Africa in particular, they have a bad rap, whether it's true or not. But
They have
there's
a
a
bad rap everywhere.
no. But I think South Africa is particularly bad. It'll be the drug trades, the like modern slavery,
Yeah.
the shark fin, all of that sort of stuff is that stigma that sits with the more recent immigrants. So you want to step away from them, be like, no, we're legit. You know,
Yeah.
we aren't part of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely a crossover for in Australia as well, where a lot of the
Definitely.
immigrants, unfortunately, that's how they have to get by is through doing different activities. They didn't get to go to university, didn't get to go to school here. So
Yeah,
they
but
had
then
to
you
go
got
and
the
find other
cohorts
ways.
as well, I guess, who are the university students that they they probably, the parents are sending them over. They're spending quite a lot of money
Yeah,
to be in Australia. So I think there's almost like two camps, right? Or like two different identities that Asians in
yeah,
Australia might actually have.
yeah. No, I 100% agree with that.
But when you're talking about the whole stigma against like Asians coming over, like with the Chinese in South Africa, I'm like, we get that here as well though.
Mm.
Like even in Brisbane, like, if we the Vietnamese, as soon as you say you're Vietnamese, people are like, you must know someone who's into drugs or a drug dealer. And I'm like,
It's usually
no,
true, isn't it?
I literally do not know anyone. I'm like, I know like legal like drug dealers, like pharmacists, which, like that's literally all I know.
You've got a dealer.
And then
They
like
just work at a pharmacy.
but I think that's also why my parents live in the suburb that they live in, where it's not like it's still
Mm.
Asian. It's still Asian, but it's not, let's say, the Vietnamese community because there's a stigma around the Vietnamese community, how they talk, how they dress, and the way that they are. So I think, how you guys mentioned, like, there's a stigma of what in South Africa, like what the Chinese were like. I'm like, I guess it happens a bit, like, it happens everywhere.
It's a
Yeah,
shame though, isn't it? Because, a few bad eggs kind of cloud the entire group.